is Joel with BlankTV. We are here with Tosin Abasi, Animals as Leaders. A lot of you were screaming for the video. We have so many comments on the videos on our page. I've seen a million people talk. I've read articles about the video, and people talk about how the visuals are awesome, and the guy who directed it, I forget.
Jason Wynn.
Yeah, but people talk about the music and the visuals, but not one, I haven't seen anyone talk about, so what does it stand for? What is the meaning of it, you know?
It depends on what part of the country you're from, because if you're from Iowa or like, you know,
good point.
There's a lot of, they're essentially factory farms, and so it's, you know, for cattle, pigs, chicken, but it's like a highly efficient way of, you know, producing meat, and there's a lot of impact that comes with doing things that way. So I don't know, but CAFO was just like, I've been reading a lot about industrial food at the time, and the imagery, you know, if you were ever to drive past a CAFO, you could be, you know, a mile and a half away and smell the ungodly stench of, you know, 30,000 head of cattle. Just anyway, so like I don't want to say I liked, but it's such a dramatic and kind of overtly negative sort of vibe, and that song is particularly aggressive and kind of like long, and so I just kind of put the imagery together.
You could see like organs and hearts beating. Is that that represents the animals?
Yeah, nothing we do is hyper like literal, and being an instrumental band, it even continues in that direction where there's no words telling you explicitly what to feel when you're listening to the music. Or so with the video, we essentially left it up to the artist Jason Wynn to kind of create whatever imagery like he thought, and I think he went more off of like the general sound of the band, like our aesthetic sonically, and so that's why there's a lot of like weird sort of otherworldly, sort of alien-looking imagery in that. So it's not the most specific, you know, treatment for the song title. Just in general, it's supposed to be, I don't know, have you thinking about a lot of weird shit.
That's beautiful composition at the same time. Well, that kind of leads into another thing. You said you kind of leave it to the viewer as to how they interpret it. Would you say that would be most of your music? I mean, it's an instrumental. I think you've compared it almost like to reading a book, being an instrumental band.
Yeah, because I mean, in my mind, if there are lyrics, obviously you're hearing, you know, a pretty. I mean, you're hearing the lyrics, and it can almost dictate what your mind can come up with based off of the words you're hearing. But with instrumental music, I think the sonic qualities of the music take the place of what words would have been. So like essentially like the notes you're hearing and the rhythm that you're hearing and the texture of all of it put together, the dynamic level, all that stuff creates a more abstract sort of picture. And so it's like an internalized or subjective interpretation of what's going on, because there aren't any words to tell you to feel happy or sad or, you know, in love or whatever the case is. So the reason I compare it to reading a book and then seeing the movie version of the book is that when you're reading words, you know, there isn't anything other than like your mind's interpretation of what those words mean. And so you're creating the environment, you're creating the characters. So when you see the movie, the environment is imposed on you, the characters are actually real people, and you no longer have the flexibility to kind of change them into what you know, imagine what they would be. So that's kind of the parallel I thought of, you know, book to movie.
You've been on an endless array of some great tours. It's pretty happened fast and quick.
Yeah.
And was it pretty cool touring with Circa Survive?
Yeah, that was like a bit of a, you know, breath of fresh air, because the tour we had done right before it was the Summer Slaughter, which is like an annual extreme metal tour, and we were just dying to play in front of an audience that wasn't necessarily already into extreme metal, and we'd only done, you know, progressive metal tours or death metal tours at that time, and then obviously Circa is like, you know, they're doing really well for themselves, and they have such a large fan base of really devoted fans, and so it was an opportunity for us to see like what people outside of like metal or instrumental music or musician-y music would think about hearing our stuff, you know, playing to teenage girls and things like this. The tour was amazing. Circa rules. I mean, watching them every night was incredible. Like, I'd only hope that our band gets to the point that they've already gotten to. So we learned a lot, and it was just, I think it's helped broaden our fan base too.
Is it correct in saying that from all the tours that Animals as Leaders has been on, you're the only instrumental band that's been on all these tours?
Yep, I think so. Yeah.
With some of the tours that you go on and some of the bands that you play, some of the bands it's more of the scene and how they look, and not so much how they play.
Right.
Is it the exact vice versa with Animals as Leaders? Would you say that's correct?
I think we aren't supported by an established scene, so it's not like pop punk or like screamo or whatever, where there's like a whole list of bands that represent a look and an approach to music, and all their fans kind of fit into that category. With Animals, like we've been a support band more than we've never headlined, so it's hard to know what our 100% fan base would look like. But there is like I find that our fans, if you wanted to call them like instrumental music fans or progressive metal fans or whatever, are less concerned with the whole like scene thing, but they're very enthusiastic about the music that they do like. They're oftentimes musicians themselves, but what's cool is a lot of times that they aren't. But I think the fact that we don't come with this pre-prescribed look and scene is kind of reflected in the fans who come to see us, because it's a very diverse sort of.
No specific genre.
Yeah. So there's jazz fans, there's metal heads, there's everything in between. It's pretty cool.
You're primarily self-taught. Atlanta Institute of Music.
Yeah.
Is that where the jazz, the classical influences came in? Was that beforehand? You like this?
Yeah, it is actually. So I mean, I've been playing guitar for over 10 years before I went to music school. I went to Atlanta Institute of Music, I think in 2006. It's a 1-year program. So basically, my musical development was based off of things that I could look at, and somehow incorporate into my playing through, demonstration basically. So I watched a lot of like, Paul Gilbert videos, Frank and Bali, John Petrucci, all these guys did like.
I was gonna mention him.
Yeah, how to shred videos, So I was able to say like, oh yeah, if I just get a metronome and alternate pick, I'll get faster at it. But none of this was like a structured approach to harmony. So when I went to music school, it was, I remember our theory class, like no one had an instrument in it. You sit with, staff paper and you learn about, diatonic harmony and all this stuff. So for me, it was like taking all this stuff that I had like haphazardly picked up as a musician and kind of filtering it through this like structured approach to harmony. So it would help to organize my musical ideas and to simplify what was going on, because there are rules, and if you don't know them, you can feel like you're approaching a much larger, disjointed picture. So by learning everything, through like the sort of foundational approach to learning music, it was helpful to organize. So that's the classical and jazz stuff came through from that, because I had jazz performance, I had classical guitar, I had to develop a repertoire and technique and stuff like that. So
Kurt Cobain, it would make sense here to Steve Petrucci and Steve Vai, influences. Was it music? Was it lyrics? Kurt Cobain seems to be a big factor in your influence.
Well, yeah, it's most basically because like when I got a guitar, that's what I was listening to, and it was like right during the height of alternative rock. So I also loved, Soundgarden, and like they did a lot of progressive, they had a lot of odd metered music, but it was done so well that you didn't really notice it, which is cool. And they also, Kim Thayil was just like a really cool guitar player. He would, use a lot of alternate tunings, and he had leads that weren't like your obvious like, leads. But the Kurt Cobain thing is, I guess at the time that I got a guitar, it was the first music outside of like Guns N' Roses and like Michael Jackson, whatever was on MTV. It was like kind of dark and moody, and like it had some depth that I wasn't used to encountering. I was 12 years old, so it's like, but I think he was an amazing songwriter. I actually really love how simple a lot of his songs are, but like when you're listening to it, you don't really care about the complexity. There's like another value that's present there, So he's just a gifted songwriter, I think. So that was that's what I learned first on guitar, a lot of Nirvana.
Naveen and Javi, those guys are smoking. People just kids go crazy about Naveen's drumming.
Yeah.
How did those guys come into the fold? I'm not familiar with that part of this.
Yeah, No, it's most basically Naveen was a drummer for this band Animosity that was like, you know, closer to a death metal band. And while they were, you know, touring, I was in a band called Reflex.
Reflex.
Yeah. So like we became friends just because of mutual respect for each other's bands, and then we actually became friends and we toured together at some point. And at one point the basis of Reflex became the basis of Animosity. So it was a very like, there was a lot of cross-pollination. Naveen, I guess Animosity kind of quietly, you know, disbanded. They didn't really like officially release anything. Naveen had just been like taking time off from music, and he heard the Animals as Leader CD. And this is a year before Prosthetic put it out, you know, so he was just like, man, this stuff is really cool, like, and I would get back on a kit and like go back on tour if you wanted me to play for this. And I was like, I mean, I'd seen him play in Animosity and I knew the force. So I was definitely down to do it. And it was actually really difficult because I lived in Washington, D.C. and he lived in San Francisco. And we would have had to ship this kit. And there was all these other kids who were sending me YouTube videos of themselves playing the songs perfectly and stuff. But
auditioning?
Mm-hmm. But with Naveen, it was just like, as a human being, like, you know, I consider him one of my like best friends right now. And like, so that's a huge element to forming a band. It's like the relationships that's present in the band. But beyond that, dude, he's a musical force. Like, I love playing with him. It's awesome. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Javier I'd known for, at this point I've known him for about 10 years, and he actually showed me, he had a 7-string guitar when I met him, and I didn't have one. And he's like, dude,
is that how you started?
That's how I started 7-string, yeah, okay. Through Javier, because he was older and he like already was, he was into you know Dream Theater and a lot of like progressive sort of stuff, and I was a bit younger, so there was a bit of like a big brother effect. But yeah, he was the lead singer of this metal band I joined, the first metal band I ever joined, and so he wasn't even playing guitar, but they had all these songs that were like tuned really low. He was like, well, why don't we just use 7 strings as opposed to tuning our 6 strings down? And then I just fell in love with the 7 string and just continued on it. I started touring with Reflex, and he went to like college and all this stuff, and it was basically like, hey, I'm doing this this solo project. And he and I had kind of always really vibed when writing music. He plays classical guitar as well, really well. So he showed me some classical stuff. And I just knew that like what I wanted out of another guitar player wasn't necessarily like someone who could like shred and all this stuff. It was more of someone who could help with composition and wasn't afraid of like inverting like a minor 9 chord and actually knew how to do that and kind of just had their own musicality. So he is definitely like the perfect, he fits all of those, all that criteria.
Misha,
Mm-hmm.
Did he write some of the music with you on Animals as Leaders?
Yeah, he would come up with like parts. So basically, like I'd approach him with, and I'd say, yeah, like, this is kind of what I hear for the song. And then beyond writing all the drums, like he would be like, hey, let's try this little. Like, he would write a riff in the middle of the song to glue maybe 2 parts together, or he'd have an idea for like a melody line for a lead. So it was very like collaborative. It was almost like he co-wrote, but you know, I had a large amount of material, and then he was just that glue. I mean, it was all his production. He essentially wrote all the drum parts for it.
Okay.
So yeah, so he's like a huge part of that album. For sure.
What was your history with him before the record?
He was just another musician that he was the first guy that I ever heard, you know, use pirated software and like a custom PC to like pull off recordings that sounded like, you know, you went and spent $30,000 in a month straight, you know, tracking. And it was just like, man, this one kid is doing all this stuff. It sounds amazing. And there was this eerie element of like musical kinship, because like some of his note selections and stuff, I was like, man, I totally would have done the same thing. And it's weird when you see that in another musician. So working with him was the most seamless collaboration I've ever had. I didn't have to explain any of the riffs. He instantly understood all of it.
Are you still giving guitar lessons?
It's
still have time for it?
It's become kind of difficult, but I feel like it's something I always want to do to some extent, because it's actually really enriching for me. Like, I love seeing all the different approaches to playing that guitarists have, and through explaining what I'm doing, it illuminates like you know what I'm doing to myself, which is really cool. So yeah, I'll continue to do guitar lessons.
If you could share the stage with any musician, alive or dead, who would it be? Or if you name just a few. Any musician alive. At first I was going to ask guitarist, I said no. Any musician, alive or dead, who would you like to share the stage with?
That's a good question. Who would I like to?
Ain't it?
It's funny. Damn. Quite a few dudes. I mean, my brain is. I'm just thinking, okay, what drummer and what bass player? The guitar thing gets weird because like the guitarist I would choose, I probably wouldn't play. I just want to watch them play. I love Frederick Thorndahl. Like he's one of my favorite musicians who have ever lived. You know, and it'd be really cool just to, I don't know, anything with him. Morgan Argren is a drummer who actually played on Special Defects, which is Frederick Thorndahl's solo CD, and it's a work of art. And so he's actually a drummer I'd love to play with. But also like maybe someone like Terry Bozzio, you know, like huge drum kit, like has his own drum CDs, you know, or like even someone like Bjork or Tom York or something. I forget his name. Longstreth is his last name. He sings for the Dirty Projectors. They're like this indie band, and like his composition is some of my favorite stuff in the world. I love Joanna Newsom. Yeah.
She's there. She plays the harp, right?
Yeah.
With an unforgettable, quirky voice.
Yeah, she's one of the best songwriters I think I've ever encountered.
Yeah, that's haunting stuff.
But also, like, man, there's this group called Noisia. They're from the Netherlands. They make like drum and bass and really dark like dubstep, and their sound design is just like, it's like as good as like watching. What am I thinking of? This is gonna sound dumb, but you know how Avatar is almost like even if it was on mute, it'd be worth watching because like visually, it's so. Everything they did was just represents like the peak of like technology right now, and it's almost like a dream, you know. I feel like electronic music is the one genre of music that isn't bound by what a physical instrument can do. So these guys in Noisia are really just like sonically, like it sounds like a giant robot in a warehouse, like throwing flaming boulders around. It's just like that's the kind of stuff that like sonically like impresses upon me like visually. So to work with them would be really cool, just to like on a sound design level. Rezo is another producer of electronic music who's like is capable of creating these like environments and like size and effects. So.
Cool. Those are good answers. Would you have a message for young people watching, striving musicians who are just striving to improve upon what they're doing? A lot of people who watch you obviously emulate you. Would you have any kind of advice if a young person just said, what would you recommend that I do?
Yeah. I mean, most basically, I think you need to consistently practice. So as opposed to doing like a 4-hour marathon, on a Sunday afternoon, it's more beneficial to do like 20 to 30 minutes every day. And then you have to figure out what it is you want to sound like, and it's probably present in the music that you love. So really, listen to the music you love and try to isolate factors in that music that you think you could actually promote in your playing, and then try to incorporate those into an actual routine of practice. And then beyond that, like in the long run, cultivating individuality is like a huge, because any of the guitar players we could talk about, like we know their names for a reason. They sound like themselves. They don't sound like someone else, and it's like one of the beauties of being who you are is that there's only one of you. So it's like there are dudes who can outshred me. You can go on YouTube and they're playing faster and cleaner. It doesn't really matter, but it's like my intent is to just have a voice that's separate from anyone else, because it's not really competition or any of that. It's like it's more about expression, individual expression. So you need to kind of figure out what it is you do on the guitar that no one else does, or what you do particularly well, and promote those things.
You are one sharp dresser.
Oh yeah?
You are one sharp dresser, and everyone watching BlankTV would like to know, can I have your hat?
Can you have my hat? You can't have it.
Yeah, I tried.
Hey, this is Tosin Abasi from Animals as Leaders, and you're watching BlankTV. Dangerous music for dangerous people.
I was going to say let's do it again, but I like that.